Morning light drifted gently across the wide windows of Portland International Airport, spreading a soft glow that touched every corner of the bustling terminal. It was the kind of golden light that made a person believe the day would unfold quietly without surprise, like the slow rhythm of a familiar melody. Travelers moved with the usual purpose of early flights, rolling their suitcases across polished floors, calling out to one another, sipping coffee while trying to shake off sleep. Nothing in the air hinted that the day would soon hold a moment people would remember for the rest of their lives. Officer Harold Bennett walked with steady steps through the main concourse, his K9 team pacing beside him with quiet discipline. 14 dogs moved like a single body, obedient, and focused their paws, tapping softly against the tile. And near the front of the group trotted Arkana, the husky shepherd mix, whose bright eyes missed nothing. Harold often said that Arkana was born with a gift that no training manual could explain. The dog sensed danger the way old sailors sensed storms at sea. Some called it instinct. Harold called it grace. He breathed in the familiar blend of fresh coffee and warm pastries drifting from the small cafes that lined the hall. For 15 years, this airport had been a second home to him. He had walked these halls through winter storms, summer crowds, and the quiet hours before dawn. Nothing much surprised him anymore. Or so he thought. A boarding announcement echoed faintly. A child laughed somewhere in the distance. Couples moved past, hands linked, while tired business travelers studied departure screens with furrowed brows. It was a normal morning in every possible way. But as the team approached Gate 12, Arkana paused. It was subtle at first, a small hesitation that tugged lightly on Harold's attention. The dog lifted her head, ears tilting forward as if catching a sound not meant for human hearing. Harold slowed, watching her carefully. Years of shared work had taught him to respect even the smallest change in her posture. When Arkana sensed something unusual, life had a way of proving her right. The other dogs noticed her shift as well. One by one, their steps grew tighter, more deliberate. Their breaths deepened, and their eyes began scanning the space ahead. Harold felt a quiet ripple of tension move through the group. He placed a gentle hand on Arkana's back, trying to read the silent language that only a handler could truly understand. Then it happened. Arkana stepped forward sharply, her body alert and firm. The other dogs followed, forming a loose arc that tightened with every step. And at the center of Arkana's focus stood a tiny girl no more than 4 years old. She wore a pale pink jacket and held a small, stuffed bear pressed to her chest. Her blonde hair shimmered under the morning light like strands of soft wheat. She did not cry. She did not call out for help. She simply stood there beside a luggage cart, as still as a bird, afraid to breathe. Harold felt something shift inside him. A child alone at a gate was already troubling. But the way Arkana stared at her sent a deeper chill through him, one that reached an older place in his bones. The dogs were no longer scanning the terminal. They were studying that child. Arkana took another step, then another, and without waiting for a command, all 14 dogs closed in around the girl. Passengers stopped mid-stride. A suitcase rolled away from its owner. A man holding a cup of tea froze as the liquid sloshed against the rim. Conversations halted as if the entire hall had forgotten how to speak. People stared in stunned silence at the sight of 14 trained police dogs forming a tightening ring around a small child. Not attacking, not snarling, surrounding her with a strange, charged purpose. Harold's heart pounded. Never in all his years had he witnessed his team act without command. Something was happening. Something beyond routine, beyond protocol, beyond anything he could have prepared for. And as the light from the tall windows fell over the circle of dogs and the trembling little girl, Harold Bennett felt the first hint of a story that would soon shake the entire world. For a moment, the terminal felt strangely hollow, as if every sound had been pulled away by an invisible hand. Officer Harold Bennett stepped forward, his breath tight in his chest. Arkana and the rest of the K9 team stood firm around the little girl, their bodies steady, their eyes locked with a focus that carried warning and concern at the same time. It was a posture Harold had seen before, but never directed toward a child. tension in the air settled like winter frost. Passengers stared with wide eyes. Some lifted their phones, unsure if they were witnessing danger or something else entirely. Others backed away, holding their children close. A small hum of nervous whispers rolled through the crowd, rising and falling like uneasy wind. The officer closest to Harold, Paul Turner, stepped up beside him. His tall frame cast a long shadow across the floor, and his usually calm face tightened with confusion. Harold could feel Paul waiting for an order, but he had none to give. Even he did not understand what was unfolding before them. The little girl looked up with pale eyes full of fear. Her grip on the stuffed bear tightened until her small knuckles turned white. She took one shaky step backward, almost stumbling as her shoes slid across the polished tile. Her voice broke through the silence, thin and trembling. "Please, make them stop." Her plea pierced the tension like a fragile thread snapping in the cold. Harold felt it settle deep inside him. She was frightened, too young to make sense of the circle closing around her. He knew he had to reach her somehow, despite the instincts of the dogs who stood like living walls between her and the world. Paul stepped forward, his voice steady, though his eyes betrayed his worry. "Sweetheart, we need to ask you a few questions." His tone was gentle but firm, shaped by years of guiding frightened travelers through unexpected emergencies. The child shook her head quickly. "I did nothing wrong." Her voice cracked like dry wood. Her small shoulders trembled under her pink jacket. Arkana let out a deep bark, sharp and commanding. The other dogs answered in unison, their voices overlapping in a powerful chorus. The sound filled the hall, echoing up toward the high ceiling. More officers rushed toward the scene, boots tapping across the tile, hands instinctively ready for whatever threat might reveal itself. Harold raised his hand at once. "Hold your positions." The command cut through the noise like a blade. If the officers pushed forward too quickly, the dogs might react even more strongly. Harold trusted the instincts of his team. If they refused to move, there had to be a reason grounded in something deeper than training. The girl looked from one dog to another, her breath shaking. She pressed the bear closer to her chest, as if clinging to the only comfort she understood. The light from the tall windows lit her hair in a soft glow, making her appear even smaller, like a lost child in a world suddenly too large. The dogs did not snarl. They did not lunge. Yet their bodies held a firm tension, as if standing guard against a danger no one else yet sensed. Their tails were stiff, their heads lowered, their steps slow but deliberate. It was not aggression. It was protection. Harold could see it clearly now, though he had no explanation for it. A man near the boarding line whispered to his wife, "Is she dangerous?" The woman shook her head slowly. "Or are they protecting her?" Harold felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He had led these dogs for many years, and he knew their signals well. They were not reacting to the child herself. They were reacting for her, as if shielding her from something hidden just out of sight. Something only their instincts could touch. He stepped closer, but kept his voice soft. "Sweetheart, we are here to help you. You are not in trouble. I promise." His words floated gently toward her like a warm blanket in the winter cold. But the dogs did not ease. Arkana lifted her head, her bright eyes fixed, not on the girl, but on the small, worn, stuffed bear pressed tightly against her heart. And in that still moment, Harold sensed the faint tremor of a truth waiting to rise. A quiet tremble moved through the air as Harold inched closer. He could feel every beat of his own pulse steady yet strained, like the slow thump of a drum before a storm. The other officers held their distance, trusting Harold to read the moment as only a seasoned handler could. Years of guiding the K9 unit through danger had taught him that dogs sense truths that the human eye often missed. Today, their instincts had risen with a force he could not ignore. The little girl looked small amid the towering shapes of the dogs. Her pale eyes glistened, filled with a fear she could not name. Her lower lip quivered, and she rocked ever so slightly, as if seeking balance in a world that had shifted beneath her feet. Her voice came again, soft as a fading echo. "I do not understand. I did nothing wrong. Her words trembled like a leaf caught in a restless breeze. Harold wished he could kneel beside her, place a hand on her shoulder, and promise her safety without hesitation. But Arkana and the rest of the dogs stood between them, a wall of unwavering tension that refused to break. Paul Turner stepped beside Harold, his brows drawn tight. The dogs barked again, louder now, their voices rising in sharp bursts that struck the ears like sudden cracks in dry wood. The sound startled several passengers who quickly backed away, clutching their belongings with anxious hands. Within seconds, airport security swept into the terminal. Their boots pounded against the floor as they formed a loose perimeter around the growing crowd. Some officers radioed instructions while others tried to guide frightened travelers away from the scene. Questions flew like startled birds. What is happening? Is that child in danger? Are the dogs out of control? But none of the officers had answers. Not yet. Harold watched Arkana carefully. The dog stood firm, her ears pointed, her body vibrating with a focused tension that Harold had only seen in life-or-death situations. She was not driven by fear. She was acting with purpose, a purpose that ran deeper than training or habit. Something is wrong, Paul muttered under his breath, eyes locked on the child. She is terrified. But the dogs are not threatening her. Harold nodded slowly. His voice was quiet, steady, shaped by years of guiding others through uncertainty. They are not reacting to her. They are reacting to something near her. As if responding to his words, Arkana took a single step closer to the girl. Her nose lifted slightly, tasting the air around the stuffed bear held tightly to the child's chest. The other dogs followed her movements with remarkable precision, each one angling toward the toy as if drawn by an invisible thread. Arkana's growl rose again, low and warning, a sound that rumbled through the floor and settled into Harold's bones. It was not a growl of anger. It was a signal, a message. The girl held the toy closer, pressing it under her chin as though it were the last safe thing in the world. She began to tremble, her tiny hands shaking with the weight of fear and confusion. Her eyes darted from Harold to Arkana, searching for understanding she could not find. Harold took a breath that felt heavy and sharp at once. That stuffed bear was no ordinary toy. He felt the truth forming slowly, inching into the light, like dawn over winter hills. Whatever had stirred the dogs into this fierce circle was not inside the child's heart. It was hidden in the soft, worn fabric she held so dearly. And the question that now pressed itself against Harold's mind was simple, chilling, and impossible to ignore. What was inside that toy? The air inside Gate 12 felt as if it had stopped moving. A hush spread across the hall while Arkana leaned forward with a focus that tightened every muscle in her body. Her bright eyes, fixed on the stuffed bear, clutched tightly in Anna Collins' tiny hands. The toy looked harmless, its soft fabric worn from years of love, but the dogs sensed something deeper, something hidden beyond the gentle appearance. Harold drew a slow breath. He knew Arkana better than he knew most people. The dog had saved his life once, guiding him away from a device, moments before it erupted in a distant warehouse. Since that day, he had trusted her instinct with an unshakable certainty. And now that same instinct rose again with silent urgency. Arkana stepped closer. Her breath stirred a faint flutter of the toy's fur. The second she leaned in, a low rumble vibrated through her chest. The sound rolled through the circle, and the other dogs answered with short barks that rattled the nerves of everyone nearby. Their tails stiffened and their bodies shifted inward, tightening the barrier between the girl and the rest of the hall. Anna flinched at the sudden movement. Her eyes grew wide and glossy with fear. She hugged the bear so fiercely that her arms began to tremble. Her small voice cracked in the air. "Please do not let them take him." Harold felt the tug of compassion settle deep in his chest. It was clear she clung to that toy with the devotion children often give to things that hold their memories. But something was wrong inside that soft fabric, and the dog sensed it with an intensity that could not be ignored. Harold lowered himself slowly, hoping not to startle the girl or the dogs. His voice softened into the warm tone he used with frightened travelers and tearful children. Anna, we are here to keep you safe. I promise no one is angry with you. She looked at him through tears, her small chin trembling. I do not understand why they are barking. Neither do we, sweetheart, he said gently. But Arkana thinks something about your bear needs our attention. The name Arkana seemed to catch her notice. She glanced cautiously at the husky shepherd mix, whose eyes held no anger, only fierce determination. Arkana took another breath near the bear, her nostrils flaring as if following an invisible trail of scent woven into the fibers. She lifted her head sharply, ears tilting toward the ceiling. Paul Turner spoke softly beside Harold. She is picking up something strong. Look at her posture. Harold nodded. Arkana was reacting to the toy with the same intensity she showed when explosives or foreign materials lingered nearby. But there was no ticking sound, no visible wire, no sign of danger that human eyes could catch. A woman behind them whispered anxiously, "Could the toy be hiding something?" Another voice answered, "Dogs do not react like that for nothing." Arkana barked again, short and commanding. The other dogs turned as one adjusting their positions in a formation that looked almost rehearsed. The movement made the crowd gasp. Some stepped backward. Others clasped their hands together, watching with breathless fear. Harold felt a cold thread of realization slip into his thoughts. The dogs were doing more than warning. They were shielding. They were placing themselves between the child and the world, as if guarding her from whatever danger rested inside that soft toy. He looked into Anne's frightened eyes and spoke with steady care. "Sweetheart, I need you to trust me. I know how much that bear means to you, but Arkana thinks it carries something we must understand." Anna clutched the toy tighter. She shook her head with slow dread. He leaned closer, his voice calm as warm daylight. "Something inside your friend is calling to the dogs. Something they cannot ignore." Arkana stepped forward once more, her nose nearly touching the bear. And in that still moment, Harold realized the truth was about to break open, changing the calm morning into something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The moment Arkana eased forward and brushed the tip of her nose near the stuffed bear, the fragile calm inside the terminal shattered like thin ice under sudden weight. A burst of barking erupted from the entire K9 unit, fierce and commanding, filling the hall with a thunderous warning that sent waves of panic through the crowd. Someone screamed. Suitcases toppled. A cup of hot coffee slipped from a shaking hand and splashed across the floor. Passengers rushed backward in every direction. The once orderly line dissolved into chaos. Mothers lifted their children into their arms. Elderly travelers clutched the backs of seats for balance as the terminal rattled with nervous cries. The sound rose and fell like the roar of an approaching storm, carrying the raw fear of people who felt danger without understanding it. Harold stood rooted for a heartbeat, his breath caught between instinct and disbelief. He had witnessed panic many times in his long career, yet nothing prepared him for the sight of his dogs breaking formation and unleashing a storm of warning barks at a child's toy. He lifted both hands high, his voice rising with all the strength his lungs could hold. "Everyone stay back. Give us room. Stay calm." But his words were swallowed by the swell of fear. People rushed toward the escalators. Others darted toward the main corridor, their footsteps echoing like frantic drumbeats. The airport speakers chimed with an alarm that added another layer of urgency to the chaos. Arkana positioned herself between Anna and the frightened crowd, her fur bristling, her body tense but steady. The dog's bright eyes scanned the area with an intelligence that seemed almost human, alert to every movement, every breath of uncertainty. The other dogs mirrored her posture, adjusting their stance outward to shield the small girl at the center of the storm. Anna clung to her bear with trembling fingers. Tears tracked silently down her cheeks, her breath short and uneven. The noise overwhelmed her. Her small shoulders shook as she pressed her face against the soft fabric, too frightened to look up. Harold crouched a little, ready to move toward her, but he did not dare break the ring of dogs without reading Arkana's signals. He could feel the tension radiating from them, a tension that came not from aggression, but from deep instinct. Paul Turner stepped beside him, speaking loudly over the barking and the alarms. "Harold, they think someone is coming for her. They are guarding her, not attacking." Harold nodded, though the knot in his stomach tightened. He had trusted these dogs through fires and bomb threats, through long nights and dangerous calls. They had never failed him. If they sensed danger, then danger was already close. A panicked traveler shouted, "Is that a bomb?" Then another voice rose. "The toy. It is the toy." Arkana barked again, a sharp command that silenced even the crowd for a brief moment. The dogs tightened their circle. Their bodies formed a living shield, each one ready to push back against harm without hesitation. Harold felt his heartbeat thrum against his chest. He knew that if Arkana reacted so strongly, something inside that stuffed bear was more than unusual. It was serious. It was dangerous. And it could no longer be ignored. Anna finally looked up, her voice breaking with fear. "Please, help me. Please." Her plea struck Harold like a blow. He stepped forward with more resolve, his voice deep and steady. "Sweetheart, we will help you. I promise you that with all my heart." Arkana lifted her head, her eyes catching Harold's for a single intense moment. It was a silent message, one he had learned to trust above all others. The danger was real, and it was already upon them. Red lights flashed overhead as security alarms continued to echo through the terminal. Officers moved swiftly to redirect travelers, urging them towards safer areas, while calming the ones who struggled to understand the sudden chaos. Through all the noise, Arkana did not move from her place beside Anna. The dog's stance remained firm, her eyes locked on the small stuffed bear that trembled in the child's hands. Harold approached with slow, measured steps. He kept his posture low, trying to ease the pressure that weighed heavily on the frightened girl. Her breathing came in small, uneven gasps, each one filled with confusion. She looked up through tear-filled eyes, clinging to the toy with all the strength her tiny arms could hold. "It is all right," Anna Harold said gently. "Trust me. You are safe." She shook her head, the fear in her voice barely rising above a whisper. "They are scared." Harold felt a chill settle through him. Children had a way of sensing truths adults sometimes overlooked. He glanced at Arkana, then at the other dogs. Their focus was intense. Their instincts pointed to a single source. That toy. Paul Turner hurried over with a portable scanner cradled in his hands. His face was pale and his fingers gripped the device as if it weighed far more than its simple frame suggested. The hum of the crowd faded behind him as he knelt beside Harold. "Let me check it," Paul said quietly. Harold nodded, though a heaviness pressed against his ribs. He turned to Anna with a calm voice. "Sweetheart, we need to look at your bear." "Only for a moment. I will give it right back to you." Anna hesitated. Her lip trembled again. This time she did not speak. She only lowered her gaze to the toy, then slowly lifted it toward Harold. Her hands shook as she let it go. Harold accepted the bear gently. The moment it touched his gloves, he felt a strange weight within it. Something metallic. Something cold. He had handled hundreds of toys in past security checks, yet this one carried a stillness that sent a ripple of unease through him. Paul pressed the scanner against the soft fabric. For a heartbeat, the device remained silent. Then a sharp beep pierced the air high and clear. The small screen lit with a warning signal that made Paul's face drain of color. "Harold, we have a metal core inside the torso," Paul murmured. "Something is wired." The words sank into Harold like stones falling into deep water. Around them, Arkana growled low, her ears flattening slightly as the rest of the dogs shifted into a defensive ring once more. A woman near the crowd gasped. Another clutched her chest. The tension grew heavy, stretching across the hall like an invisible cord pulled too tight. Anna let out a small sob. "It is just my friend. I did not know." Harold reached out and placed a gentle hand on her arm. "I believe you, sweetheart. None of this is your fault." The scanner beeped again louder, this time confirming the presence of wiring hidden beneath the worn fabric. Paul looked to Harold with fear flickering across his features. This is not a simple toy modification, Harold. Someone put this inside with care. Arkana stepped even closer, her nose inches from the bear now resting in Harold's hands. Her growl deepened to sound that carried warning urgency and a plea for action all at once. Harold rose slowly, lifting the toy enough for the nearby bomb technician to see. The weight of the situation settled heavily in the air. Whatever rested inside that bear had never been meant for a child. And in that moment, Harold knew with absolute certainty that this morning was no longer a routine patrol. It had become a race against something far darker. The hum of alarms softened as officers secured the surrounding area, but a heavy stillness filled the space where Harold stood. He held the stuffed bear as if it were made of glass, careful with every movement. The soft brown fabric looked innocent under the bright lights, yet the weight inside it felt like a whispered warning from a place unseen. Paul kept his eyes fixed on the scanner while Arkana pressed close, her breath steady but alert. The arrival of the bomb technician, Oscar Fleming, brought a new wave of silence. He moved with calm steps born from years of facing the unknown. His expression remained gentle, though his eyes sharpened with focus as he studied the toy in Harold's hands. He adjusted his gloves and placed a small toolkit on the floor beside him. "All right," Harold Oscar said quietly. "Let us see what we have." Harold nodded and lowered the bear into Oscar's hands. The technician lifted it with care, turning it slowly as if listening for something inside. Arkana watched him closely, her ears shifting with every small sound. The rest of the dogs remained in position, their bodies still forming a protective wall around Anna. Oscar placed the bear under a portable inspection lamp. The bright white light revealed a faint seam near the back of the toy so subtle that only an experienced eye might notice it. He reached for a small cutting tool, his movements slow and steady. "Keep her back, Harold. I want to make sure nothing shifts." Harold stepped in front of Anna, crouching to shield her view. She looked up at him with frightened eyes, searching his face for comfort. He offered a soft smile and rested a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You are safe now, Anna. Just breathe with me. One slow breath at a time." She nodded and clung to his sleeve. Her tiny fingers trembled, but she tried to match her breathing to a steady rhythm. Oscar made a careful cut along the hidden seam. The sound was soft, barely more than a whisper of fabric. As he opened the toy, a faint glimmer of metal caught the light. Harold leaned closer, unable to hide the tension that drew tight across his brow. Paul stepped beside him, his breath held tight in his chest. Oscar reached into the opening and drew out a small metallic sphere no larger than a walnut. Thin wires curled around it, delicate yet purposeful. The device looked complex, far beyond anything a child's toy should carry. "It is not an explosive," Oscar said, studying its surface. "There is no trigger here, no detonation pattern, but it is active." Or it was. Harold felt the first wave of relief, only to have it replaced by something colder. Active? In what way? Oscar tapped the device gently, then held it closer to the scanner. A faint pulse of blue light flickered along its surface. "It is a transmitter. A tracking unit. Someone has been sending out a signal through this toy." Paul exhaled slowly. "So they were watching her." Oscar nodded. "Watching and following." Arkana barked once, sharp and knowing, as if confirming what she had sensed all along. The other dogs shifted their weight, their postures easing only slightly, but their eyes remained alert. Anna clung to Harold more tightly, her face buried in his jacket. "I did not know. I promise I did not know." Harold rested a warm hand on her back. "None of this is your doing, sweetheart. You are the one they tried to use. And that is why Arkana protected you." Oscar rose to his feet, holding the device carefully. "Whoever planted this wanted to know exactly where she was at all times. This was no accident." The meaning of those words settled across the terminal like a long shadow. Harold felt it reach into his chest, filling him with a sense of urgency that left no room for hesitation. Someone had marked this child, and they were not finished yet. The murmurs around the terminal quieted as Oscar carefully secured the small transmitter inside a protective case. Its cold metallic surface no longer glowed beneath the bright lights, yet the weight of its presence lingered heavily in every heart nearby. Harold glanced toward Arkana, who continued to watch Anna with steady devotion, her eyes soft yet vigilant. The circle of dogs held firm, their bodies still a silent promise of protection. Harold returned to Anna's side and lowered himself until he was eye level with her. The child wiped her cheeks with the back of her small hand, her gaze drifting nervously toward the bear now resting on the technician's table. She pressed her lips together, gathering words she did not quite know how to form. Harold spoke gently. "Sweetheart, can you tell me where you got that toy today?" Anna hesitated. Her fingers twisted around the edge of her jacket, fidgeting with a small thread. She looked down at her shoes, her small voice trembling in the stillness. "I met a man. He said he could fix him." Harold felt a quiet chill move along the back of his neck. He leaned in slightly, keeping his voice calm. "What man are you talking about, Anna?" She looked up, eyes clouded with fear and confusion. "He was near the hall where the shops are. I was waiting for my mom. He told me my bear had a loose stitch. He said he could sew it for me, so it would not fall apart." Harold exchanged a grave glance with Paul. The girl had not wandered far. She had been within reach of many eyes, yet someone had found a moment to slip close, offering kindness wrapped in hidden intent. "Did he take the bear from you?" Harold asked softly. She nodded. "I did not want to let go, but he smiled and said my daddy would want it fixed. He said he knew my daddy." Harold's heart sank. A stranger using the name of her father meant the threat was far more personal than they had imagined. Someone had been watching this family closely. Someone who understood their grief. "What did he look like?" he asked. Anna closed her eyes, searching her memory with careful effort. He had dark hair. His coat was gray. He talked softly. He said it would take only a moment. Then he went into a room behind the stores. When he came back, he gave my bear back and told me to stay close to my mom. Her voice cracked as she added, "I thought he was being kind." Harold felt the weight of her words settle into his chest like a cold stone. He reached out and gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "You did nothing wrong, Anna. You trusted someone who pretended to be good. That is not your fault." Arkana nudged her gently, as if adding reassurance in her own quiet language. Anna placed a small hand on the dog's head, her fingers curling into the soft fur. Arkana stood still, her eyes warm. Paul exhaled slowly. Whoever he was, he knew exactly what he wanted. Oscar stepped forward, holding the case that contained the device. This transmitter was active until we disabled it. Someone nearby was watching for the signal. Harold felt the words settle deep inside him. His gaze slid toward the wide windows of the terminal where the morning light now seemed paler. Anna whispered, her voice barely rising. "Did I do something bad?" Harold shook his head firmly. "No, sweetheart. You were used by someone who meant harm, but you are safe now. Arkana made sure of that." The little girl leaned against the dog with quiet trust, unaware that her simple story had just opened a door to something much darker. And Harold sensed that whoever had touched that bear was still closer than anyone wished to believe. Before Harold could ask another question, a sharp cry echoed from across the terminal. It rose above the hum of alarms and the shuffle of officers cutting through the tense air like a desperate plea carried on a cold wind. "Anna." The sound made the child flinch. Her head snapped toward the entrance of the security corridor. A woman rushed through the opening, her breath uneven, her hair loose and tangled from frantic running. Her face carried the unmistakable look of a mother whose world had been shaken to its core. Officers moved to block her path, but she pushed forward with the strength of pure fear. Her voice trembled as she cried out again. "Please, let me reach her. That is my daughter." Harold stood at once. He lifted a hand to the nearby officers, motioning them aside. The woman hurried closer, knees nearly buckling as she shoved past the last barrier. She dropped to the floor beside Anna, gathering the child into her arms with a sob that carried both relief and sorrow. Anna hugged her tightly. "Mommy." The terminal softened around them. Even the restless crowd seemed to pause, drawn into the quiet intensity of a mother holding her little girl as if afraid she might vanish again. Harold stepped back, giving them space. The sight was a powerful reminder of how fast life could change, how a single moment could pull a family apart and return them in the same breath. The woman stroked Anna's hair, whispering soft comforts that trembled with emotion. Her voice wavered as she spoke to Harold without lifting her gaze from her daughter. "My name is Margaret Collins. Someone took her." I turned for only a moment in the restroom. She was gone when I looked back. Harold nodded with understanding. His voice remained calm and steady. "You found her now. She is safe with us." Margaret clutched her daughter even tighter. Her shoulders shook. "I searched every corner. I begged people to help me. I thought I had lost her forever." Anna buried her face in her mother's coat. Her small hands held on with desperate trust. The moment felt fragile, filled with a quiet ache of fear that finally had room to breathe. Paul stepped forward and spoke to Margaret gently. "Did you see anyone suspicious near you before she disappeared?" Margaret hesitated. Her brow furrowed as she fought to steady her voice. "There was a man. He brushed past us when we entered the restroom. I did not think anything of it." He carried a small case and kept looking toward us. When I stepped into the stall, Anna waited outside the door. It was only a minute or two. When I came out, she was gone. Harold exchanged a grave look with Paul. The pieces of the story were beginning to align. The stranger Anna described matched the figure Margaret recalled. Someone had planned this with intention and patience. Margaret lifted her gaze to Harold, her eyes filled with dread. She placed a trembling hand on Anna's shoulder. "Please tell me what happened. Why were all these dogs around my daughter?" Harold spoke with quiet care, choosing his words with the sensitivity the moment deserved. "Your daughter was found alone near Gate 12. Arkana and the other dogs sensed something dangerous. They surrounded her to protect her until we could reach her." Margaret looked down at Anna with disbelief and gratitude. She pulled her closer, her voice breaking. "Thank you for staying still, my love. Thank you for being so brave." Anna whispered softly. "I was scared, but Arkana stayed with me." The mother looked toward the dog, eyes glistening. Arkana stepped forward and pressed her nose gently against Margaret's knee, her tail lowering in a calm, respectful gesture. In that quiet moment, Margaret understood that the dogs were not a threat. They were the reason her daughter was safe. And Harold realized something else too. The danger that had taken Anna once might still be lurking somewhere nearby. Margaret held Anna close, her hands trembling as if afraid the child might slip away once more. Harold watched the mother's face shift from pure relief to a deeper, heavier worry. He knew that expression well. It belonged to someone who had been followed by shadows longer than she dared to admit. Paul stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "Mrs. Collins, we need to understand why someone might target your family. Is there anything unusual that has happened recently?" Margaret hesitated. Her eyes dropped to Anna's hair as she brushed a small tangle away with gentle fingers. For a moment, she did not speak. Then her shoulders sagged as though a weight she'd carried alone for too long was finally pressing her down. "I was hoping it was all in my mind," she whispered. "But now I know I was not imagining it." Harold knelt to her level, keeping his tone soft. "Tell us what you have seen." Her breath shook as she gathered her thoughts. 3 months ago, my husband Robert died. They told me it was an accident. They said he slipped on ice driving home. She paused, swallowing hard. But Robert knew how to handle a winter road. He grew up in Michigan. He would never have lost control like that. Harold listened with full attention. The grief in her voice was deep and raw. "Robert worked for a defense contractor," Margaret continued. He helped design systems that protected military data. A few weeks before he died, I noticed he seemed troubled. He said nothing directly, but he kept checking the windows and asking if any unfamiliar cars had driven past our house. Paul exchanged a tense glance with Harold. The puzzle pieces were gathering shape. Margaret wiped a tear that had slid down her cheek. After the funeral, things grew worse. I saw the same sedan outside the grocery store, the same man near Anna's preschool. I convinced myself it was coincidence. I had enough sorrow. I could not bear to think there was more. Her voice broke. Then today, that same fear returned. Harold nodded gently. And now someone used your child to carry a transmitter. Margaret stared at him with wide, horrified eyes. Transmitter. In her toy. Oscar, who had been standing near the examination table, stepped closer. It was designed with precision. Someone wanted to track your daughter's location with exact detail. Margaret pulled Anna into her arms again, holding her with protective strength. Who would do such a thing? Why use her? Harold answered softly. Because no one would suspect a child, and no one would question a stuffed bear. Anna heard their words and pressed closer to her mother. I did not know, Mommy. I promise I did not know. Margaret kissed the top of her head. You did nothing wrong, my sweet girl. Nothing. Arkana approached with quiet steps. She touched her nose gently to the child's arm, offering comfort in the silent language only dogs truly mastered. Anna reached out and placed a small hand on the dog's fur, drawing strength from her presence. Harold breathed, deeply piecing together the threads now stretched before him. Someone had followed Margaret since Robert's death. Someone had slipped close enough to her daughter to alter a toy without raising suspicion. Someone had watched every step she took. Paul spoke softly. This is no random act. Whoever did this has been watching your family for months. Margaret looked up, her voice faint. Then they are still searching for us. Harold rested a steady hand on her shoulder. Not anymore. We will protect you. Arkana will not let anyone near Anna again. As the mother nodded with grateful tears, Harold sensed a new shift in the air. The truth behind Robert's death and the stranger's intentions was only beginning to surface, and whatever waited beyond this moment was far from finished. Oscar carried the protective case with the transmitter to a nearby table where the lights shone brightest. He opened it carefully, revealing the small metallic sphere nestled inside. Though silent now, the device looked like something crafted with intention and skill far beyond anything meant for children. Harold joined him, his brow furrowed as he studied the tiny wires woven through its center. This was not placed by accident, Oscar said quietly. Whoever built it knew exactly what they were doing. Paul approached with a tablet linked to the scanner. He tapped the screen and waited for the readings to appear. When they did, his breath caught in his throat. The device was transmitting location signals to a receiver that was active until just a short while ago. Harold felt a ripple of dread. How close? Oscar responded without lifting his gaze. Close enough to be within range of the terminal. Margaret, who had stepped nearer with Anna held protectively in her arms, stared at the small device as if it were a venomous creature. Someone was following us through that little toy. Harold nodded solemnly. Not only following, watching, studying your movements. Anna hid her face against her mother's shoulder. Arkana moved beside them with silent comfort, her presence steady and grounding. The other dogs remained alert, their eyes scanning the hall with unbroken vigilance. Paul continued reading the movements of the tracker. This thing sent out pulses at regular intervals. Consistent, steady. Whoever was receiving those signals knew precisely where Anna was at any moment she carried it. Margaret covered her mouth with a trembling hand. And they have been doing this for how long? Oscar answered softly. Weeks at least. Maybe longer. Harold studied the device again. The design was compact and polished with smooth edges and wiring arranged with care. It did not look like something made in haste. It looked crafted by someone who understood military-grade technology. Someone who understood the same world Robert once worked in. He asked Paul, when you disabled the signal, did it leave a trail? Paul nodded slowly. Yes. The last transmission pinged off a receiver that was active very close by. Close enough that the person monitoring it may have already realized the signal has gone dead. A quiet shiver passed through Margaret. She held Anna even tighter. They know we are here. Harold rested a comforting hand on her arm. You are not alone now. We are here with you, and Arkana will stay close. Arkana gave a soft whine as if answering his promise. Her tail lowered gently and she pressed her side against Anna's small leg to offer reassurance. Oscar stepped back from the table. This transmitter was not meant for harm on its own. It was meant to direct someone toward a target. The explosive threat that followed was placed elsewhere. Harold understood. Whoever planted this, inside Anna's toy, had planned more than one step. They had scattered pieces of danger and observation like stones on a path waiting for someone to take the wrong turn. The transmitter had been their eyes. The explosive device found in the abandoned bag was likely their voice. He felt a slow tightening in his chest. Someone had woven a trail meant to lead them deeper into fear. Paul spoke quietly beside him. They were not just watching her, Harold. They were waiting for her to lead them to something. Harold nodded. And whatever that something was, it had become clear that the answers lay far beyond this terminal. He looked toward Arkana, who stared at the windows with sudden focus ears tilting forward. The dog sensed something again, and Harold knew that this moment was only the beginning of what waited beyond the glass. Arkana's sudden stillness drew Harold's attention like a pull on a thread. The dog stood rigid, her ears sharply pointed toward the far corner of the terminal near the long row of seats by the tall windows. Her tail lowered and a low growl rose in her chest, deep and steady. The sound was enough to make the other dogs shift once more, forming a protective ring around Anna and Margaret. Harold followed Arkana's gaze. The area near the glass wall looked ordinary at first. A stroller sat beside a bench abandoned without a parent in sight. A blanket hung from its side. A small shoe rested near one of the metal legs. Nothing seemed out of place in a busy airport where people often hurried and forgot things in their rush. Yet Arkana did not blink. Paul noticed it too. He moved closer to Harold, lowering his voice. She smells something. Oscar approached with careful steps, his eyes searching the space. He had worked alongside dogs for many years and trusted their instincts without question. If Arkana reacted, the reason would soon reveal itself. Harold spoke with calm authority. Clear this section. Move the passengers back. Officers nearby guided travelers away from the row of seats. Some looked confused, others frightened, but they obeyed as the urgency in the dog's movements became more visible. The hall emptied slowly until the far corner stood quiet beneath the morning light. Arkana stepped forward, her pace steady and deliberate. Harold kept close behind her, trusting her lead as he had countless times before. The other dogs fanned out, each one scanning the area with silent focus. When Arkana reached the stroller, she stopped. Her nose hovered above the blanket, then drifted toward the lower basket. Her growl deepened. Paul knelt beside the stroller and lifted the blanket with gentle hands. Underneath lay nothing more than an empty cup and a folded magazine. He looked up, confused. There is nothing here. Arkana moved again, circling the stroller. This time she pushed her nose against the small pocket sewn into the back panel. Her reaction was immediate. She stepped backward and barked sharply, the sound sharp enough to echo across the hall. Oscar rushed forward with his scanner. He swept it across the stroller, passing it over the pocket. The device hummed softly at first. Then a sudden spike of sound filled the air. The screen lit in bright red. Oscar looked up, his expression grave. Residue. Strong residue. Harold felt his breath tighten. What kind? Oscar kept scanning, his brow furrowed. Something unstable. Something that should not be left in an open area. Paul stood quickly. Someone planted it, moments before the dogs reacted. Arkana barked again, urging them forward with rare intensity. Her paws scraped the floor as she pushed toward the back of the stroller, guiding Oscar's hands, like a compass driven by instinct alone. Oscar reached into the pocket slowly. When he withdrew his fingers, he held a small piece of cloth, dusted with a pale powder. Even from a distance, Harold sensed danger in the way Oscar's eyes widened. "This is not from the toy," Oscar whispered. "This is from something else." Harold felt a chill move through him. Whoever had placed the transmitter inside Anna's bear had also left behind this residue. It meant they had moved through the terminal with purpose. It meant the threat was not limited to one object. Margaret tightened her grip around Anna. Their eyes followed the officer's movements with rising fear. Oscar closed the pocket and stepped back. "This powder is linked to an improvised device. Someone planned more than one step today." Harold closed his eyes for a moment, steadying his breath. The dogs had sensed the trail long before any machine could. Their instincts had revealed a danger too well hidden for human eyes. Arkana pressed her nose to Harold's hand, urging him onward. He understood her message. The threat was not just close. It was already here. The terminal had just begun to settle when Arkana froze again, her ears tilting sharply toward the tall windows overlooking the runway. Her body stiffened from nose to tail, and a deep growl rumbled through her chest. The other dogs instantly mirrored her stance, forming a living wall that surrounded Anna and Margaret once more. Harold followed Arkana's gaze. Beyond the glass, the morning fog clung to the tarmac, soft and pale. At first, he saw nothing out of the ordinary. Fuel trucks crept slowly along their routes. A distant airplane taxied to its gate, and ground workers moved with routine ease. Then Harold noticed it. A dark van sat idling near the perimeter fence. Its windows were heavily tinted, and the engine sent thin curls of exhaust into the cold air. The vehicle was too far from the usual service lane, tucked into a spot no authorized car should occupy. The sense of wrongness clung to it like a shadow. Paul narrowed his eyes. That van was not there earlier. Arkana let out a sharp bark, the sound cutting through the hall. Her body leaned slightly forward as though ready to leap through the glass if she had to. The other dogs responded with low growls, each one facing the same direction. Harold grabbed his radio. "Control this is Bennett at gate 12. We have an unmarked van at the perimeter. No plates visible. Possible connection to a threat inside the terminal. Requesting tactical units now." Static crackled for a brief moment before the reply came through. "Units are en route. Hold your position." Margaret clutched Anna tightly. The child pressed her face into her mother's coat, frightened by the rising tension. Harold placed a reassuring hand on Margaret's shoulder. "Stay close. Do not move until I say." Outside, the van's headlights flicked on. A low hum rose as the engine revved, sending a shiver across the tarmac. Then, in a sudden burst of movement, the van lunged forward, racing along the fence line. Paul shouted as he lifted his radio. "The suspects are moving eastbound. They are fleeing." The distant sound of sirens echoed from the far end of the airport. Patrol cars rushed toward the van, lights flashing through the fog. The chase had begun. Inside the terminal, Arkana barked again, her voice fierce and urgent. She pressed against the window muscles, tense. The other dogs joined in, their combined voices rising like a warning carried on the wind. Harold felt the air shift inside his chest. The dogs were not simply reacting to movement. They recognized something. Perhaps the scent from the toy, or the faint trace left on the stroller. Whatever it was, Arkana knew the men in that van. As the vehicle sped across the access road, Harold caught a glimpse of two silhouettes inside. One of them turned just enough for the overhead floodlights to catch his face. Even from that distance, Harold saw the cold emptiness in the man's expression. Arkana snarled a sound rare enough that it sent a chill through Harold. She had known that scent, that presence, the same one she smelled on Anna's bear. The van swerved around a service truck, tires screeching. Sirens grew louder as police vehicles closed the distance. Harold's radio crackled again. Unit 3 in pursuit. Suspects refusing to stop. Approaching East Access Road. Harold's heart pounded with a mix of urgency and resolve. The danger had not ended with the transmitter, nor with the powder found in the stroller. The men who had taken Anna and planted the device were still close. Too close. Arkana stared through the glass, her breath fogging the window. Her body trembled with alertness. Harold understood her message without needing a single word. This was far from over. Outside on the tarmac, the chase unfolded with sharp urgency. Sirens cried through the cold air as patrol cars closed the distance behind the fleeing van. The morning fog lifted in thin streaks, revealing flashes of blue and red lights that streaked across the service road. Harold watched from the tall windows, his breath pressed deep in his chest. Arkana stood at his side, eyes locked on the distant movement. Paul reported updates through his radio with steady determination. Unit 7, approaching from the north. Unit 3 in pursuit from the west. Suspects refusing to stop. The van swerved, tires screeching as it clipped the edge of a fuel truck. Sparks scattered across the pavement, then faded as the vehicle sped on. The driver pushed the engine harder, trying to break through the last stretch of fencing that guarded the access road. Harold felt the tension rise like a tightening rope. He had seen desperation before. He knew the look of people who feared being caught more than anything else. The man behind that wheel fit that pattern with chilling precision. Arkana barked once, a sharp sound filled with instinctive knowledge. She sensed the danger building outside, felt the rising heat of intentions that were anything but good. The other dogs shifted behind her, their bodies taut and ready even though they remained inside the terminal. Paul watched the scene with wide eyes. This is our moment. They will not outrun the barricade. Ahead of the van, 2 patrol cars turned sharply and slid across the service road. Officers leapt out and pulled thick strips lined with metal spikes across the asphalt. They worked with practiced speed, movement swift and sure. Within seconds, the path ahead was lined with sharp points ready to stop anything on wheels. The van hit the spikes before the driver could react. A loud pop filled the air as the tires burst one after another. The vehicle lurched sideways, fishtailing dangerously before slamming into the perimeter fence. Dust rose in a cloud as the metal mesh bent inward under the force. Officers swarmed the scene. Doors flew open as tactical teams aimed their weapons with firm resolve. The driver stumbled out, attempting to flee on foot, but one of the K-9 officers released a trained dog named Hunter. The swift shepherd raced forward and tackled the suspect before he reached the open field beyond the fence. The second man emerged with hands raised, but officers reached him before he could attempt any escape. Paul relayed the news with a breath of relief. Suspects in custody. Evidence secured. Arkana let out a soft rumble, not of anger, but of satisfaction. She had known the danger was lingering, felt it in scents and subtle traces hidden from human senses. Now the threat was contained, though Harold sensed the story was far from complete. Within minutes, more officers arrived to examine the damaged van. They opened the rear doors and discovered a collection of objects that made Harold's stomach tighten. Several laptop stacks of false passports, a case filled with encrypted drives, and a folder marked with images of Margaret and Anna taken at different airports over many months. Paul studied the folder with a heavy expression. They were watching this family across states. This was never about a single day. Harold felt the gravity of those words settle deep inside him. The pattern was too complex to be random. The men in the van had been part of something far larger, something that stretched well beyond the airport gates. Arkana pressed her head gently against Harold's leg. He rested his hand on her back, grateful for her steady presence. The danger had been stopped for now, but the truth behind the shadow that followed this family was still waiting to be uncovered. By the time the last police cruiser rolled away from the airfield, a gentle quiet settled over the airport. The flashing lights faded into the distance, leaving only the soft hum of nearby engines and the low murmur of travelers returning to their interrupted journeys. The storm that had shaken the terminal hours earlier now drifted into calm like a passing cloud that left behind a grateful sky. Inside Gate 12, the world felt different. The crowd was thinner, the tension lighter, and the air warmer with relief. Anna rested in her mother's arms, her tiny fingers curled around the fabric of Margaret's sleeve. She was exhausted but safe. That simple truth felt like a small miracle. Arkana approached the child once more, moving with softened steps. Her bright eyes no longer carried the sharp alertness of earlier hours. Instead, they held a gentle warmth, a quiet reassurance only a loyal dog could offer. Anna lifted her head and reached toward her with a tired but grateful smile. "You stayed with me," she whispered. Arkana lowered her head until Anna could wrap her arms around her neck. The little girl pressed her cheek lightly against the dog's fur. It was a moment so tender that the terminal fell silent in a way that felt almost holy. Even the officers around them stood still, humbled by the simple truth that courage often comes from places without words. Margaret knelt beside her, daughter, tears welling in her eyes. She brushed Anna's hair back gently. "You were so brave, my sweet girl, and this beautiful friend protected you with all her heart." Harold watched the scene from a short distance. His shoulders finally relaxed after carrying the weight of fear for so long. He felt the ache of long hours and sharp stress, yet also the quiet satisfaction that comes after a day where things could have ended in heartbreak, but instead ended in grace. Paul stepped beside him with a tired smile. "You know, Harold, people will talk about this for years. The videos are everywhere already. Folks are calling Arkana a guardian angel." Harold chuckled softly. "She never cared for titles." Paul nodded. "True. She only cares that the child is safe." Harold looked toward the little girl who now rested her head against her mother while keeping one hand gently on Arkana's fur. "You can say that again," he murmured. Oscar joined them with a folder tucked under his arm. "The case is sealed for now. The suspects are in custody. It will take time to uncover everything, but for today, this family is safe." Harold felt the weight of those words settle into his heart with quiet gratitude. He glanced down at Arkana, who had returned to his side, her tail gently brushing the floor. "Good work today," he whispered, resting his hand on her head. "You saved more lives than you know." Arkana's ears twitched slightly, as if she understood every syllable. In the following days, the story traveled far beyond Portland. News stations shared footage of the 14 K-9 officers forming a protective circle around Anna. People watched with amazement as Arkana stepped forward, fearless and unwavering. Artists drew pictures of loyal dogs standing guard over a frightened child. Veterans sent letters thanking the team for their service. Children across the country sent cards decorated with hand-drawn paw prints. Yet through all the praise and attention, Harold remained humble. He turned down interviews and invited no spotlight. He knew the real hero had 4 legs and a heart far larger than her size. 2 weeks later, Harold and Arkana visited Anna and Margaret at the hospital where doctors monitored the child for stress. The room was warm with sunlight pouring through tall windows. Anna sat up in bed and smiled the moment she saw them. "Arkana." Her voice carried joy, faint but bright. Arkana trotted to her side and laid her head gently on the bed. Anna stroked her fur with small, careful hands. "I wrote something for her," Anna said softly. She reached for a small, folded note and handed it to Harold. He opened it, reading the uneven letters, written with love. "Tell Arkana she is my angel." Harold felt his throat tighten. He looked down at the dog, her eyes warm and steady. She had given everything she had that morning, driven by instinct and devotion that asked for nothing in return. He placed the note gently in his pocket. "Come on, girl," he whispered. Another mission complete. As they left the room, Harold realized something quietly profound. Heroes did not always come with badges or uniforms. Some arrived with wagging tails, steady hearts, and courage born from pure loyalty. And as the sunlight followed them down the hallway, he also knew this truth. Sometimes the bravest souls in this world walk on four legs.